Hello, welcome back to Football Coach 365. Thanks for joining us for this special Football Talks episode. Today, I welcome one of the most recognized soccer coaches in the USA, Coach Marcus DiBernardo. Thank you for joining me. He's known for being an expert in coaching, but also in developing young players with his unique training methodology. His ideas about cognitive training has an impact on many coaches, especially in the USA. He has worked for important teams and also for 16 seasons for Mono College, if I'm not mistaken. So without, also would like to add that you have also written a lot of books about soccer coaching. And now, without further any other words, I would like to welcome you to Football Coach 365 and thank you for accepting my invitation, Coach.
Oh, no, I appreciate you having me. But yeah, you got my background right. I'm currently a university coach in the United States, but I work at all levels of the game from 4-versus-4, 6 years old, all the way up to adults. And really, my main focus is connecting academic theory to training session design. And that's something I've been passionate about for many, many years. And that drives every part of my training session and my methodology.
Something I missed in my introduction, but we need to mention it, is that you have also a lot of trophies besides developing players, mostly with in college. Is that correct?
Yeah. So for me, there's a difference between player development and actually winning trophies with my teams. My teams are older boys, maybe 19, 18 years old to maybe 24 years old. In that aspect, I have 4 months to win a national championship. That's not long-term development. That is short-term. This is how we need to organize the team. We need to establish a style of play. And that's what we do. And it's a unique situation because I have players from I could get kids from Flamingo, from Santos, from Costa Rica, from England, from Japan, and I have to figure all this out in a way where language could be an issue, and obviously different playing styles, culture becomes an issue, and we have to figure out how do we win with those players. But there is a overlap between my methodology and the team, my older team. Because the way I do train them is everything is representative game design. We don't break the game into little pieces. Everything is trained in the whole as much as we possibly can.
I understand that because this is a big debate, as you mentioned, to see in two different parts the youth development and winning also trophies. Because I don't know if you agree, if you are doing a youth development, sometimes it will be very difficult to win because it means that you have to accept a lot of mistakes from the players during the development.
Yes. I mean, listen, the first thing that I think about in youth development, and now culturally, this is different from culture to culture, but where I am, kids love to play. So if you take young kids and bring them to the field and they don't get to play a lot, they're not going to come back. It's the first thing. After every practice session, I ask the kids, did you enjoy what we did today? If they don't say yes, we have a problem because they might not want to come back. So that's the first thing. And for me, it is representative game design. We use constraints in everything that we do, even from the little ones. But those constraints are always removed, so they play without constraints as well. We teach positioning, we teach technique, and overall soccer intelligence is covered with the constraints in these representative game designs. Now, in my methodology, possession is very important at all ages. Now, obviously, a young kid, it's very hard for them to understand anything other than their relationship with the ball. So 1v1, maybe 2v2, these things are very good for the younger players. It's very hard for a 7-year-old to understand how to play 5v5. It's not the best thing for them. But in the environment, what if you have a team of 15 players at that age group? Because that happens. How do you run your practice session? So the easiest thing is to play 6v6 plus 3 or 7v7 plus 1. But is it the best thing for them? And these are, these are things that you come up against in everyday reality. So possession is self-organizing, right? Possession doesn't mean players have positions. So even from the youngest ages, say 1v1 plus 1, it's self-organizing. There's no position. They have to go to where the space is. You could build that up to 2v2 plus 2. Okay, it's very small, it's little kids, but it's still self-organizing. If you do something positional, now positional is players know the spaces they need to cover and they're assigned those spaces. So in my methodology, from the youngest to the oldest ages, we have positional exercises, we have possession exercises, and then we have all our constraints, which is worked into the game model. It all overlaps, but we have this. I also break it into small, medium, and large area possession positional constraint. Now, when you get into the medium and the large, it tends to be more game model. It doesn't have to be, but it tends to be. For me, I take up. I don't think there was a big debate in U.S. Soccer Federation a couple years ago about how a rondo is not game specific, and for me, I say it's nonsense. I say when I talk about the whole, soccer to me comes down to two things. When you have the ball, can you exploit space and time to score? When you don't have the ball, can you shut down space and time so the opponent can't score? That's it. I don't need any principles of play. I don't need to teach the players principles of play. It comes out to those two things. So those things in a rondo, you're learning how to exploit space and time by keeping the ball. Now, a traditional rondo, a 6v2, whatever, in a circle, I don't really define that as a rondo. For me, there's a little blur between rondo and small-sided game. But if you're looking at a 5v5 plus 5 or plus 4, something that's similar to a 4v4 plus 4 Guardiola's positional rondos, you have 360-degree scanning. You have players who are occupying certain spaces, not occupying each other's passing lanes. This is very game realistic. You have counter pressing, even though you don't have counter goals. So this brings me to the fact that for me, that is a separation. It's not the whole game, but it's game representative enough to have developmental qualities for the players. But isolated, unopposed practices, I do realize with older teams and workloads that you can't, anytime you have opposed, for me, that usually means more chance for injury and greater workload. So maybe the day before game, do I go through some unopposed, maybe pattern play in the attacking third? Sure, that's okay. I'm not saying you can't do it, but I would say it has limited benefits because in the game of soccer, and we can talk about this in the theory perspective, the game is unpredictable to a certain extent. And players need the freedom within a game model, which I would call a thin membrane that kind of keeps everybody together, while at the same time, players have the opportunities to find solutions without the game model being so rigid that they have to stick to the solutions of the game model. I don't know if that all makes sense to you.
Everything makes sense. Just to mention, I have also read some of your books. I like a lot. I love your coaching methodology and how you like to train the players, and that you believe a lot in cognitive training and also in making your drills as realistic as possible. But just to also ask you about your training sessions. From your bio, we can understand that you have read a lot and you have developed your own theory about football and how to train the player. How you manage to marry, to balance between the theory and the actual training. And because in many occasions, when you go on the pitch, you have different number of players, you have different level of players in skills. They are not all elite, for example. You have some players with some capabilities and some with less. How you can marry the theory and the practice?
So listen, it's a great question. With my university team, I don't run into that issue very much because everybody's at a very good level. But when you run into youth soccer, you see this all the time. What happens if you have a training session that's planned for 14 kids and only 7 kids show up? How do you create something meaningful? And for me, this is what shows you the experience and the quality of a coach. Coaching is not easy. Can you make a training session that has representative game design where players are making maximum meaningful decisions on the ball for most of that training session? Can you do it with any amount of numbers and any amount of ability levels? It's not easy, right? It is not easy to do. Maybe you're constraining some players while you're not constraining other players. Maybe you're having plus players, maybe you don't. Maybe you need twice the number of plus players to get some sort of flow going compared to, if the players aren't at the level. So maybe you're having a bigger grid size. Maybe you're making scoring easier. Those are things that for me, this comes back to, I like to be in a current feedback loop with the players in my training sessions. I hate to have a pre-planned session where I do 10 minutes of this, then I have to go to 10 minutes of this, and it builds into the next thing. What if the players are struggling? I need to change it right away. Or what if what I'm doing is really good and I want to stick with that for 30 minutes instead of 10? I can do it because that's what I see in the moment. And for me, that's really important. It's not easy for a beginning coach to do that, but it's important. Listen, I always give the example of, well, what if it's Monday and my team had Sunday off or whatever, and they're not concentrated and they're coming into practice with a low energy level? I can tell. I say hello to every kid before they get on the field. I can tell what the energy level is. So what if I say, you know what, we were going to do this one warm-up, but instead I'm going to make the warm-up really difficult, really competitive, and really high energy because in the current moment, that's what they need. So I'll throw everything out the window and I'll go a different direction. I think that's really, really important to have in your training sessions. And I think that we have to get out of the habit of saying, hey, my coaching federation told me I need to start with small, I need to introduce the topic, then from the topic we build into larger, and then we have to end with scoring on goals. I think it's all nonsense. I think that the coaching federations are a business. I think they're in a business to make money, and they're in a business to promote the people they want to promote. And I don't succumb to any of that. And I would challenge the federations to show me their methodology, show me their academic theory, show me why a license costs $10,000 when you can go and get all that information online. For me, the thing that makes coaches better is having good mentors, coaching at a good club where they can learn from good coaches, but really self-reflecting getting good information and applying it on a daily basis. That's where you learn. You don't learn from doing 2 weeks in a coaching course and now you're an A licensed coach. For me, that's a money grab. So then the other thing is, we always talk about, hey, we want to create these creative players. How about creating creative coaches? How am I going to be a creative coach if you're putting me in a box and telling me I have to coach this way? So for me, that's the guy that I am. And it's very difficult. Now, listen, Major League Soccer has called me in to give them presentations on how I look at coaching and my methodology and stuff. But the reality is, very few of these organizations, that because I'm kind of a guy who has no rules and I'm out on my own, not everybody wants to attach their name to me because I don't always represent what a federation would represent. So one of the things I look for when you're talking about applying theory at all levels is you have to get to the very basic level of what is real information. So if I'm going to dribble by a cone and what's real about that cone? There's no information. The cone doesn't move. I don't have to adjust my technique. I don't have to adjust my intentions. There's nothing there. And again, if you're going to try to dribble by a person who's going to try to tag you, now you have to adjust, right? It's real information. The person is coming at you. You have to adjust your technique. So my point is, everything you do in training, is it real information? This is why when I see like a lot of the cognitive stuff where you scan and you tell the color of a cone, it's not real. What is that? What am I visually attuned to? Because at the basics level of academic theory is your decisions are based upon 99% your visual perception. So when the reason I say I don't teach principles of play is because what is that? It's words, it's verbal. If I want to switch the field and I see my player doesn't do it, I can quickly come over to them and say, hey, take a look over there. What do you see? Or take a look over there. And I say, I won't tell him how to get the ball there, whether he has to go through the number 6, but if I can change his perception by making him, they call it attune to something else, I'm going to attune them to something else. When I first was learning how to drive, I used to look straight over the hood of the car. It was terrible. You couldn't tell because my face is pointing the same direction as any driver. Then my dad said, no, look over the hood, way over, look into the distance, 50 yards. My head didn't change, but I became attuned to new information. And this is why I always, give the example of the mountain climber with the mittens. If you have great grip strength and you're going to climb a mountain, you're going to perceive that mountain for your hand grips. But if I put mittens on your hands, it's the same mountain, but you have to perceive a path for your footholds. And now it's completely different because the affordances are, we each have different abilities for action. And what Messi is capable of doing, I am not capable of doing. So therefore, Messi and I can't operate under the same game model. One of my issues with a lot of coaching game models is it assumes that the coach and the game model have the answers, while players can have much better answers than the coach. And Messi, no coach can understand what he's capable of in all these situations. And if you constrain in a game model at too young an age, then the players never get to explore what their possibilities for action are. And I often call it the Red Bull energy drink game model. That's a terrible game model for youth players to develop. High press, keep the field narrow, hit balls into the target striker and look to counter press and win the second ball. Visually, you are training these players, these young players, to perceive the game in this really limited way. It might be an effective way for a team to play who can't afford good enough players, but it's a terrible development model. And even in the first team, I prefer not to watch it. But that's just me. That's, I'm not criticizing one way or another, but For me, it's not my preference. I don't find joy in it. And I think in football, you have to find joy. And the bottom line is players want the ball. So I don't know if that was a long-winded answer about a little bit of academic theory.
It was a great answer, but I also have another one question about the theory because I'm very interested about that. I have also read a lot of books trying to educate myself about coaching, but something I read a little period before it was about the differential learning theory, something that, if I'm not mistaken, Thomas Tuchel also used in his trainings, but you have also created a book about this. Is there any differential learning?
So there's a couple things. Now, for me, differential learning, we could even call differential learning there's a couple ways to really look at this. It's a little hard for me to explain, but let's call differential learning. You can almost call it donor sports as well. So a donor sport to soccer is futsal. A donor sport to soccer is beach soccer. It could be cage soccer. There could be it could be that game that in Asia where they kick it over the net. It's unbelievable. So there's skill sets that the interaction between the environment and the player develops these unique skill sets that no coach could ever teach them. So when the Ghanaians play on these bumpy fields, they're masters at controlling the ball. They can shield the ball like nobody else, and they control the ball like nobody else. It's not because a coach outlined a program for them to practice. It's because of the relationship with the environment. It's the same thing with Martinelli at Arsenal. When he dribbles, nobody knows when he's going to shoot. He's unpredictable. That's a skill set. Now, you could call that differential learning. Now, but real differential learning, there's a couple things with it. If you were to practice finishing with different balls, different sizes, including beach balls, and the thing with Peter Cech, right? He would say he made saves during the 11v11 game that he would have never made and never figured out how to twist his body if he didn't do that, saving ping pong balls and balls off of wet surfaces. So basically, you have, in any technique that you do, you have an area of stabilization. You're always going to go back to that safety zone of stabilization to perform that technique. In differential learning, there's a good chance that you're going to come out of that stabilization area because it's a beach ball, because it's whatever, because you're constrained in other ways. And through that, you're experiencing new opportunities for action and developing new types of techniques. For me, I am not so far into the process of differential learning because I think that nobody is, to be honest. I think this is an area of investigation that can go on for a very long time right now, where you can actually say, here's the training program, here's how we're going to use differential learning. You could also argue that differential learning is making players experience the error. So if players are playing they're not spreading out wide, make the field super narrow and don't say anything. Just make them play in it. Then open it up. You're forcing them to explore the error. Now, I give the example of the MLS Cup final a couple years ago between Columbus and Seattle. And Seattle gives up 2 goals the same way to the back post. And if this was a regular season game, the first thing that team would have done on Monday morning is defensive shape. And I'm advocating that means nothing. Defensive shape, especially unopposed, there's no learning there. It's just, all right, shift left, make sure we're tight, means nothing. What I would have done is I would constrain them, make them live in their area, make them overshift, maybe draw a line down the field where you want them to overshift to, and make them feel how that felt to give too much room at the back post. Then I would make that right back, who was late to come back, every time there's a transition, I would make him wait 5 seconds before he could recover to overemphasize the fact. And then I would make him play center back to give him a new visual perspective. The center backs were focused on the winger without scanning over their shoulder to see that the right back wasn't there. I'd make the center back train as a center mid to increase his scanning habits. These are things that I would say could fall under differential learning, but it's also looking at, do we always have to do the same thing that we've always done? Because the problem with coaching is you coach the way that you were taught from your dad, from your former coaches. We can do more than that. We can experiment with different things. So that's kind of my thinking, and that's why I'm always willing to push and push and push.
I like a lot of what you are saying, because I also believe that coaches should be creative, because the coaches are the people who will develop the game of football, of soccer, for the future. Just another thing, coach, what do you believe about coaching the brain along with coaching the technical and the body skills? Coaching the brain, how can you incorporate this in your daily routines?
Right. So again, I really firmly believe it's all about environments, right? So if your environments involve positional stuff, if they involve possession, these are, so let me give you this. When Toronto FC, I sat through a presentation with one of their coaches, and I sat through another one with Columbus Crew's coaches. This is a couple years ago. And one of them had 16 attacking principles of play, and the other one had like 32 principles between attack and defending. It was outrageous, just outrageous. And at the time, Giovinco was on Toronto FC, and he was the best player in the MLS, and he didn't speak English. So do you really think when a player is playing, they access in their past memories the 16 attacking principles of play of the team he's on? Absolutely not. No way. It comes down to exploiting time and space. What are the affordances of the player? What are the perceived affordances? And what are the shared affordances of the whole team? That's what it comes down to. It's a simple game. So if you're going to have these representative training sessions, they need to know, how do you play in between players? How do you play in between lines? And basically you're saying, how do you exploit time and space? So the game, I don't like to make too much more of the game than what it is. And, you know, third man running type of stuff, all these things are common themes in soccer. That third man running is just a shared perceived affordance. I know that if I play up to the striker, he lays it back off to the center mid. If the winger sees the same thing, it's called a shared affordance. The through ball goes through to the winger who runs through. It's third man running. There's not a hell of a lot that I have to say. Now, I would say this. I will speak to the players, and I'll say, hey, listen, think about this. But that's all I'm saying is think about this. Or if, you know, in my game model, if I see something that's I don't like because it doesn't look like we're exploiting time and space positionally, I'm going to say, I'm going to put the player there. I'm not asking questions. I'm putting the player there so they can perceive now visually, because I put him in that exact spot and I put him in the body shape I wanted him to be in, and say, okay, take a look at this. Boom, this is how I want you. That's it. Now, I understand with kids, maybe you don't necessarily have to be as direct, but for me, it is helpful. Now, listen, this is a little different if you look at what's happening at, say, Fluminense right now, right? You have something called relationism, right? Or relational play.
Yes.
With stack one side of the field with 7 guys, and they get these little passing combinations, and then they scale back into the center of the field. Who am I to say that that's not right? I can't say that. It's not positional. It really isn't, but it's effective. So if you take a kid, now listen, I had this, like when I first heard of this, it rang bells in my mind because I have a kid or had a kid who was from U20s at Santos in Brazil, and positional play for him became very difficult for him to do because he just liked to drift to where the ball was because that's how he grew up. And it's often people say, oh, you know, maybe not intelligent, maybe a lack of intensity. That's not it. It's just that wasn't his experience growing up. So you know, culturally, I think there's a benefit to play all over the place with all different types of players because it gives you, you know, that skill set. But at the end of the day, once you make it to a certain level, there you can see why there's a need for a game model that brings everybody at least onto the same page to give a level of certainty of what you're trying to do.
Thank you very much for your thoughts about the coaching methodology and how you like to train the players. But now I would like to move on a very specific subject about the player development, because it is something that you are known in the USA about how you manage to develop the young players. To start with, I would like to ask you, what do you see in a player um, as for you to think that this is a potential future star that could play at the elite level, maybe for the MLS? How do you decide? What do you think when you see a player playing at a young age?
Yeah. So you know, a long time ago, I read an article about some scouts from Ajax, and they saw a player at 6 years old that they said came up with football solutions to problems on the field. And like, I think I would say this, and I think you could say this by looking at like Messi's old videotapes when he was a kid. I do believe to a certain extent there are players that are born with football in their leg. I just think that some kids are born with this innate ability with the ball. That doesn't mean that through hard work, other players can't develop to a very high level too. Like they can. I just wrote an article about coaches don't develop players. Coaches can guide players and can give them environments in which they can develop and flourish in. But the main development of the players, when you look at the kids, like I talk to everybody, every player I ever had, I speak to them about their upbringing, their country, and their skill set. When I speak to my Brazilians, a lot of the Red Bull Brazil kids, they say, Coach, at 5, 6 years old, there was no internet, there's no cell phones, there's nothing to do. We go to the street because our parents know in our neighborhood, that's a safe place for us to hang out, is with our friends on the street. We play 5 to 6 hours a day. So from 6 years old to 14 years old is 10 to 14,000 hours of street soccer. That's amazing. And at 14 is when they join the pro clubs. And it was the same with Neymar. At 13, 14, he gave up futsal, which was amazing. That gave him his skill set and joined the pro club. The story after story, Matt Ozil playing in the cage for 4 hours a day with his older brothers after school. Amazing. In the article, I cite two people that I was friends with in the United States who one just signed a pro contract in the MLS and the other one I sent over to be with the English Championship League team. They didn't even want to play organized soccer until they were 12 because they played pickup games 4 or 5 hours a day in their front yard. And so here's my point. There's other environments where there's no pickup games. Damien Duff, right? He always talked about playing for 20 hours by himself in isolated technical training outside of the academy that he was in. That's a recipe for success. The Japanese players now are unbelievable. I have 6 Japanese players on my team right now. Japanese level is so high technically, And I say, is there pickup games in Japan? He says, no, not a lot of pickup games. But we train 90 minutes in everything that was similar that he said that we did at our college, in which game representative trainings. Then the next 90 minutes was isolated technique. And you're talking about over 3 hours a day of training. And that fit their environment. So, but what's the theme in all this? The theme is player motivated. You got to put in the work, right? If you don't put in the work, so I call it Jesus in a sweatsuit. Jesus in a sweatsuit is not going to create players. 90 minutes a week, 2 sessions a week with a coach, what is that going to do for you compared to 14,000 hours of soccer? So I think the best that I can do with kids is to create these variable, constrained environments where they're enjoying the game, they're learning to manipulate time and space. But I'll give you an example, like the club that I currently run, there's no street ball. The players only come twice a week, and it's only for 20 weeks a year. We need to play as much as possible because they can improve their technique in their driveway, in their yard by themselves. They cannot make decisions, meaningful decisions of how to exploit time and space outside of the team. And if that's the only team training they get, we need to be making decisions. And you have to be very careful about like looking at other domains. So I know that we do this a lot, and US Soccer has done this a lot. They look at like educators, and educators will start to compare top performing math students to soccer skill. That you cannot compare the two. You can't even compare golf or a tennis shot to soccer. It's not the same comparison. So you have to be careful of basing training methods on various domains. For me, it doesn't always translate very well. So that's kind of the theories that I have on player development, real information, right? Everything is real information.
Coach, you have also worked with, and also you are working with foreign players, and you have also experience from other countries that you managed to attend. What do you think about the difference in cultures and how the young players perceive soccer? And what are the main differences between the USA players and the European? Because the last 2-3 decades is USA soccer developing in compared to the European. How do you think about the differences?
You know, I think that the U.S. as people, we put a lot of intensity into our sports. We physically work very hard. We want to defend really hard. Where I think that we don't work enough on keeping the ball. We don't really listen on both the men's and the women's side. Like we just don't keep the ball well enough, in my opinion. And that comes down to the environments the kids play in from very young age to the older ages. You have to be able to keep the ball under high pressure against athletic people. If you can't keep the ball under high pressure against real athletes, then there's only one solution, which is to kick the ball long. And honestly, that's not the solution that I prefer. So I would like the U.S. to become better and more confident on the ball and being, but as of right now, I think that our national teams on both the men's and the women's side would be far better served to seriously just run a counterattack game because we are pretty athletic. We can get in and behind. And once we expand the game, we show our weaknesses. And I think that's where the American game is right now. And that's no criticism on the American game, It's just we don't have. Look, I'll give you one thing. This is funny. At the U14 level, U.S. has never lost to Croatia. Above the U18 or 19 level, we've never beaten Croatia. It's because our physicality just, overwhelms them at U14. But once Croatia is technical enough and they're not super athletic, but they're super technical. They play through us. And we have, I mean, has the U.S. ever produced a world-class goal scorer on the men's side? I think the answer to that is probably no. We had some guys who were good, but we haven't produced world-class goal scorers. I mean, listen, the people probably get upset with me for these opinions, but for me, I'm not trying to hurt people's feelings, but I'm just telling the truth. I think the European players who come over in the college game are more comfortable on the ball. And for me, here's what this comes down to. If you can really control the ball, you can take the athleticism out of the game. And for me, that's a massive, massive factor to have. And I try to do that with my college team. We want to take the athleticism away from the other team. We want to put them into a low block, and we want to get between 7 and 8 players into the attacking third. That's what we want to do. And if we lose it, we want to counter press. So, and that's the way I love the game. But you have to have the players. You have to have the players to do
it. So to have them, you need to train them from the very young age, isn't it?
Very young age. You have to train them from a very young age. And again, I would, there is a value in diversity. I don't think that every coach needs to have the federation telling them how they need to train their players in their club. Certain clubs could have 80% of the kids are from South America and, whatever it is, and they're super skillful guys, and the federation is saying play 2-touch. Well, maybe that's not for that club. Maybe it's for another club. And so my point is, I think that coaches and individual clubs need to have the ability to do what they want to do and train their kids the way they want to train. The best practices nationwide, I don't think that's necessary. I don't think that's needed. I don't think Big Brother needs to be over your shoulder telling you how to run your club. So that's where I really think that the United States is hindered by this U.S. Soccer Federation over everybody's shoulder trying to tell you what to do. There also is, with diversity worldwide and with immigration, I mean, look at a country like France and look at England. I mean, it's changed their playing styles with people from other countries coming into those countries and having a really positive impact. And I think the unique thing about the United States is you got 300 plus million people. Oh my goodness, you could field 10 different national teams with 10 different game models. It all depends what you want to do. But I think you eventually have to figure out, it gets more difficult because if you look at, honestly, look at Croatia. Croatia, what do they have? 4 million people, and they don't have a lot of diversity, right? And they don't have a lot of lightning speed. So what is their real choice? To play a little bit like Barcelona, because they're so technical. They need to attack as a team. They need to defend as a team. They're not really going to be the most effective team if they bunker in a low block and just try to hit people on the counter. But, that's who they are at the moment. That could change. And, so this is why football is such a nice thing. And it's really, culturally, here's the thing. Culturally, you need to find common ground. So if I have 17 different, countries represented in my team, what is the common ground? I have to create common ground and, in terms of a game model. But every kid needs to have the desire to compete, the desire to win, the desire to get better and work hard and have a good attitude every day. Those are the controllable things. And, if that common respect, even if you don't speak the same language, if you are busting your butt every day and giving everything, we all respect that. And you don't need language to formalize that. So I think what I bring is I can create these common themes that the team could latch onto from a playing style, also as, everybody, this is a misconception that we shouldn't be winning. As a kid at 6 years old, My son wanted to win every single game he played in. And for me to tell him that winning doesn't matter, it matters to him. It's not very important to me at 6 years old it doesn't matter to me, but I can't tell him that his feeling of wanting to win is wrong. It's not a wrong feeling. Let's do it. But if we don't win, we don't win. As long as, it's okay. Let's move on to the next one. But I know that winning doesn't matter in long-term plans of development, but let's not be naive. I coach this game, and I want people to have good relationships and build self-esteem and self-worth. All those things matter more than anything, but we step on the field to win. Never lose sight of that. That is one thing. It's not the ultimate thing. I'm glad my son is healthy. I'm glad he enjoys soccer and, will be a soccer fan for life. That's much more important. But it doesn't dismiss the fact that we're there to win.
You gave me, before moving on to another subject I would like to discuss, you gave me a very good pass here. I wanted to ask you, I would like to ask you, you mentioned win. How important is winning for developing a winning team? A winning mentality from the very young age to create competitive players. Is it important for a kid to learn to win from young ages?
I think everything that you do, if you give away a pass, your reaction has to be to win it back right away. Through your daily actions. Do you go to sleep on time? Do you eat properly? Do you show up to practice early and prepared? Are you mentally ready to play? Everything plays in to winning, getting a positive result. So for me, and listen, my old coach used to say, there's a multitude of sins hidden in victory. Just because you win, it doesn't mean anything. You can lose a lot and still be doing the right things, winning or losing or whatever. Winning is a terrible, terrible measure of success, in my opinion. I could give Pep Guardiola Wigan Athletic, put him in the Premier, and he's going to lose 90% of his games. I don't care. It's Pep Guardiola. He's going to lose. You have to understand the environment that you're in. Now, Pep's going to try to win as hard as he's going to drive those players. But he's probably going to drive them a little differently than if he was coaching Man City. So I think the coach, at the end of the day, winning habits is more important than winning itself. And when I first became a coach at like a high school level in the US, my first, I don't even know how many seasons, maybe my first 3 or 4 seasons, I had 1 win and like 60 losses. And we had great success. Those were very successful seasons. I mean, to this day, there's kids on that team would say, Coach, that was the most amazing. We worked harder than any team. We just worked and worked and worked. So that's why, like, even though I'm telling you winning matters, it's winning habits that matter.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's very interesting how you perceive winning through winning habits, and for me, it's very good advice this because I also coach under 15s, so it's very helpful. So moving on, I would like to ask you a little bit about the technology and the future of coaching now through analytics, cameras, analyzing individually the players, statistics, AI, now that has emerged in the football. What do you think about this, about the technology in football, and how can help coaches to help their teams perform better?
Yeah, listen, I'm all for it. I'm all for, here at the end of the day, though, here's one thing. In gymnastics, you could train for 6 to 8 hours a day, right? The gymnasts are unbelievable. In soccer, you cannot. Your body is going to give out. So can you get meaningful information through AI, through augmented reality, meaningful repetitions for your decision making with real information. If you can do that, I say that's amazing. I think that's great. I just demoed one of the AI decision making things with the Oculus headset. It was good. I enjoyed it. I don't think we're there yet with significant progress. There was one called Striver Sports back in they did American football, and they videotaped like hundreds and hundreds of defenses. So when the quarterback put on the Oculus, he would have to read the defense. The defense would come to tackle him. He'd have to make the throw. All of that without any physical impact. That's really good. One of the things that you got to understand is if you're not coupling physical action to the information, the value is limited. There is a limited value in that. There is value, and I can't give you the metric of how much value, but there's limited value because you're not coupling any real meaningful physical reaction to the information. So a while ago, I was looking at augmented reality. I was saying to myself, if you could sit in your living room as a kid and play Rondo against Barcelona, looking through those Apple glasses and actually moving your feet to pass the ball, there is a lot of value in that. That's kind of cool. So of course, there's a lot of things. Like I call this kind of stuff like additions to your soccer intelligence. When you watch video, you watch the video, but the video is from a bird's eye view. It's completely different from a player's visual perception. And remember that all your decisions that you make are based on your visual perception. It's coupling your physical actions to the real information via the visual perception, which in ecological dynamics is the reflection of light. And the reality is that video is not even close to the actual visual perception a player needs. Now, it can give you some solution creation, that bird's eye view, but you also have to remember players are not accessing past memories on the field to come out with current solutions. There is something called a knowledge base, and that knowledge base is based over time of your playing experiences, and that is important, but it's not like when you're dribbling down the field, you have to access the rules of the game that you can't pick the ball up and throw it in the stands. It's just there. It's there. You already have that. So, and for me, there's always, I like the academic theory a lot. It helps explain a lot of things to me, but it's not the finished product. And none of these things, all the studies that are done, there's a lot of studies on unopposed training versus opposed and all these things and repetitions, how much meaningful it is in repetitions if it's opposed. But you do have to come back to your own experience as a player and a coach, and you have to combine the academics with your real life experiences of what your gut tells you as well. For me, the players who grew up playing those 14,000 hours of street soccer, I don't know how many studies are showing the academic theory of that kid's going to, but there's no doubt that produces good players. So some common sense along with academic theory goes a long way. But I do agree. So I'm also one, though, if you're going to show me, this is hard. Analytics are hard. I have a friend who's one of the top guys in the stock market at Wall Street, right? And he would always say to me, be careful. You could create a theory in the stock market, back test it, prove that it can make money, but it doesn't mean it's going to make money tomorrow. Because the theory worked in the past, but it doesn't mean it's going to work in the future. And for me, you have to be careful with analytics, because it's like a doctor who's going to prescribe something because your hip is sore and he's going to do hip stuff. Well, it might not be your hip. It might be that your lower back isn't aligned. So you're prescribing stuff that actually isn't the problem. So what I'm trying to get at here is, hey, we missed 14 shots on goal. We need to work on shooting, or we didn't create enough chances. You're isolating one thing, but soccer's not one thing. Why did you not get enough shots? Why did you get? It's much more than a statistic. You have to look at it in the whole. What was the other team's line of confrontation? What was their line of restraint? What, were they a direct? How did that influence your actions? Because at every football match, let's also be clear, there's an energy level that's created between the fans, your team, the coach, the player, the moment. All these things are things that you can't see. So I agree with you that all this analytics is really great and all the technology is great, just like Moneyball, but you have to balance Moneyball with your own common sense.
Now that you mentioned Moneyball, in the movie, and we also, by reading the history behind the movie, that the analytics and the data were used for recruiting purposes and not just to record the performance of the team. So maybe analytics can be used more easily for recruiting purposes, just to identify some potential targets from a wide range of pool of players. It would be much easier rather than that using the analytics to measure the performance of the team.
Yeah, I mean, they do have software out there nowadays that's helping to say that this performance of this player, judging on their worldwide database, shows that this is professional, possibly quality kid who could. They do have that. I don't know. I'd have to. I'm not that smart, so I'd have to see, exactly what they're analyzing, and I'd have to see if that kid makes it. I mean, I don't think anything is that simple. I don't think it's that simple. But okay, if it can help filter, that's great. If it can help filter kids, it's great. But then there's also, listen, let's be honest. In football, there's so many players that are good. If you give that player a chance and you put him in the academy, you do that, he's going to develop. There's a good chance he's going to develop. Who do you want to invest your time into? Let's be honest. There's been, I think it was Jamie Vardy, right? He had signed up to come to America for a college scholarship. He was overlooked, right? There was the other one, Rob something, who played center back for Arsenal for a while. I don't know where he is now, but he signed a college scholarship or a verbal agreement to go to Manhattan College and study. But when Sam Allardyce was at Bolton, he left Bolton and brought most of the players, so he got promoted to Bolton's first team and never came to America to study. He had a long pro career. He's still in the pros. So my point is, even with all these analytics, you give a kid a chance and he takes that chance, I don't know. You could prove the analytics wrong, I would assume.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, because we see a lot of discussions and articles about analytics now in football. So I wondered your opinion about this, and especially because you live in the USA, where the development of technology it's much higher than here in football and using data in sports. Just to ask you something about coaches. What is your advice, especially for young coaches who want to excel and develop in coaching experience or through study, besides acquiring a license from the federation? What is your advice for those who want also to progress to the professional level?
Well, listen, I think if you really want to progress to the professional level, I've never known anyone to progress to the professional level who did not have meaningful relationships with people in the professional ranks. I mean, that's the number one, referral based system it's the number one way to do it. And it's a tough one, right? I've never known anybody to make a professional club as a coach without being connected through personal relationships. Now, that being said, I do believe if you're very passionate and you become the best you can possibly be, eventually people can't ignore you. They have to recognize that you're very good. And I think that soccer does a very poor job at recognizing talent at the various levels. For me, like the National Football League, like American football, they will each year they will look at the best junior kids coaches, high school coaches, college coaches, and they will try to bring them to the professional teams, maybe not as a head coach, but on staff. Because talent is talent, no matter what level you're at. And I often think that soccer is just the good old boy system. It is. They put you in a box and they say, hey, Sam Allardyce is good if your club is in trouble and you're going to get relegated. Why don't you bring him in to help save the club to stay? So he's that, right? If you're looking for a top coach, then you're like, oh, let's bring in Guardiola. Let's bring in. So everybody has their own box that they're put into, what they're a specialist at, right? Hey, this guy you don't have a lot of money, run the Red Bull high press system for you. Let's do this. So that is a tough thing. And I often think that older experienced coaches who have always been willing to grow in the game and their knowledge base is so high, I think that soccer doesn't always appreciate those guys. I think they look for young guys and where other sports really value experience. And there's now listen, I worked at a golf course when I was, for 5 years on the maintenance crew. And this is why I say, golf is a little different than soccer, but like you could have a really crappy golf swing and you could play for 20 years and be really crappy for 20 years. And I feel the same way as a coach. If you just want to keep a low block and counterattack and do some basic fitness great, you could do what you do, but you're not challenging yourself. You're not growing as a coach. You need to make yourself uncomfortable. You need to go and try new things, study new formations, study new coaches, study, how people interchange their movements and their game model. If you don't do that, you're never going to grow. So that is something that, I think you have to. The other thing about coaching is you have to leave your ego at the door. The egos can destroy people. You can't ever base your self-worth and your self-esteem based upon you being the head coach and your team winning. You're done. You're done. You have to. Humility is a big thing, but you can be confident and have a lot of conviction in who you are and what you do. But at the same time, you're not Jesus in a sweatsuit. That's just what it is. So those things are important for me. If I was, but the passion for me in the game is player development. That's my real passion in the game. I love that. And I also love player management. I love how can you get the best out of people and get the best out of your team in the way that's right for you. Because you can't really, you need to find your own way. You can't be Pep Guardiola. You can't be Jurgen Klopp because you're not them, but you could be you. And once you figure out you, I think that's really, really important.
You helped me a lot with the last two sentences because before closing, I wanted to ask you, Guardiola position a play, gegenpressing of Jurgen Klopp, or hard defending like Diego Simeone? What do you like to work as a coach, and also what do you like to see or to watch on the TV?
I like teams that can keep the ball. Guardiola is my favorite by far. That's just what it is. I think that when Ten Hag was at Ajax, they played a very interesting way. But it's hard because Guardiola has money everywhere that he goes. He gets good players, but let's be honest, he makes those players better. I'm sorry, he makes them better. Sterling made into such a good player. Like, so all my, I give him so much credit, and the way that they play is right now, he's adapted from league to league to player, and he talk about how he's adapted, but he's adapted, and I. The thing with him is, the intensity level is so high, right? And Simeone is another one that the intensity level is outrageous. Like, as a player, I can see why that could be draining after a while. I mean, this is why guys like Messi, for me, are so incredible. To play at the level he plays at without getting burnt out with all those meaningful games, I don't know. It's amazing to me because, and I think over the years, to be fair, it's funny. So when we go to like a national championship tournament, it's maybe like 8 to 10 days long, and you have to win 4 games in 8 days, and it's hard. So it's not just physically hard, it's mentally grueling. So my number one rule in all those tournaments are, as soon as the game finishes, we don't even talk about soccer at that point. Your number one job is to relax, enjoy your friends, hang out. If we on our team meetings, 15 minutes, and then back to relaxing. The second we get on the field for warm-ups for the next game is when we really start to focus in on our intensity again. There was a gold medal swimmer in the Olympics for the U.S. who I really liked, and she would be the coolest, calmest ever, laughing, joking. About 3 seconds before the whistle blew, as soon as she put her hands down and touched the diving platform, she was locked in. I love not using any wasted emotional energy. But when you're on the field, it's the highest intensity levels possible. But I firmly, and that's my own personal belief, but I still believe this is a game of joy. So even though during those 90 minutes, it doesn't mean that you can't show emotion and have fun, and it still needs to be enjoyable, but enjoyable when you're working at the highest level. So, and that's kind of, my own thing that I've taken away. And I really feel when Guardiola left Barcelona for his sabbatical, he spent a year in New York. And I think the intensity level probably got to him, and he needed a break. So that's why I think players like Messi and these guys are amazing. Messi doesn't get a break. Nobody gets a break. So that's my take on it.
I agree with you about Guardiola because many people are criticizing about the money he has from Manchester City and also Bayern and Barcelona about bringing the best players so he can play this amazing football. But many forget that when he brought Cancelo, for example, he was not the super best fullback in the world that was before leaving City. Or for Stones, he was a good central defender, but now he's a top central defender. So, yes, he has quality players, but he managed to transform it to top class. So, I also like him a lot.
Yes.
Any final thoughts, Coach, before closing this amazing discussion?
No, listen, I just want to say I appreciate you having me on and having a chance to speak with you. And we finally got this done after about 2 months. So I appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you a lot for accepting my invitation. I always wanted to meet you because I like a lot of your work and how you are trying to develop the players. And now through Football Coach 365, I had the opportunity to bring you and have this conversation, and I'm sure that our viewers will also like it. Thank you
Well,
again.
listen, if anybody on your platform is in New York and they want to stop by training, they can always email me. If you want to stop by training and you're in New York, no problem. And if I ever come to Cyprus, I'll certainly shoot you a note.
Thank you a lot. Have a nice day, and we keep in touch. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.